Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by CaliberMind. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm joined by Hana Jacover. Hana, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, I am it's hard for me to say this, but ex B2B marketer turned certified leadership and executive coach. So I spent many years client side working at a variety of different agencies in B2B, startups, big enterprise companies, and really helping them and their teams develop strategies where they can be more effective in terms of revenue generation. On top of that, also managing teams internally, leading internally. So really kind of having like to do both things, very fun, wearing many hats. Spent some time in a startup, and that really led me to assuming a new position in honestly my life as a whole, but also career wise, which was leadership and development, leadership and executive coaching, where I really get to have that one-on-one impact and also zoom out to that organizational impact as well.
And I was grinning earlier because, both on the agency side and the internal side, I'm sure you had a lot of experience with our topic, which is dealing with difficult personalities. It's a bit of an art form.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Many different personalities. I am grateful that I've had exposure to not only a variety of organizations, how they operate, what the teams look like, leadership stuff, like all of that, but specifically working with different personalities and having them be your client, where you have to really understand who they are, their motivators, on top of the organizational goals and culture and all of that, and how things work at that level. So yeah, like I feel grateful to have had that exposure and be able to build my toolkit around it.
Builds character. I have lots of character. We don't need any more characters. I'm thinking of the topics that many B2B marketers have faced themselves. We're in a meeting, the sales leader's there, and they're pretty confrontational about what they feel marketing is doing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could talk through like the sales versus marketing conflict.
Yeah, yes. And this was it's funny, this was actually my expertise for a very long time. I did a lot of lead management, a lot of facilitating around lead management, which at the end of the day is alignment between sales and marketing. So the way that I like to look at this like team relationship as well as individual is common goals. So really understanding what is the driver, what is the common goal, what is a common goal for marketing, what is the like where are the similarities, where are the gaps, and what are some of the like definitions that are around that? Because even when you have a goal, there are words that are being used that can be somewhat subjective. So when we have these common goals, we also need to look at the language that we're using, and we also need to look at the motivators. So there's kind of some of these layers. It's not enough just to create a goal that everybody agrees on. We have to understand, well, what does that word mean to you? What does that word mean to us? And how do we build alignment around that? So that's really where I feel like it starts, is just an understanding of goals and motivators and how they're seeing things.
I love that you started there for so many reasons. I feel like a lot of the conflict I've seen is a result of not getting on the same page about how to define what is a lead.
Yes.
It's such a simple thing, but it's not. It's
Right.
really not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. And you really do have to sit down. And this is why why organizations would hire us, is because we would facilitate those conversations, because there is conflict, and conflict, unless you have experience with it, is often viewed as a very negative thing, is often something where people lose their ability to regulate their emotions. And that's when a lot of the ego comes into the room. That's where a lot of the butting heads come into the room. And so to have somebody come in and actually listen to the words that are being used, listen to, put aside some of the emotions and just actually listen to what is being said and who is hearing what and who is not hearing what. And then saying, okay, here's where we're going to start. We're going to start by defining what is a lead. Okay, marketing, you tell me exactly the steps that somebody goes through in your funnel, and then you tell me exactly what that handoff looks like, and then you tell me sales exactly what you do after that, right? Just kind of learning the landscape, which I think is a missed step in a lot of situations where, hey, sales leader, do you understand this process? Hey, marketing leader, do you understand this process that the lead actually goes through? And maybe that will help us sort of come to some sort of alignment around, okay, here's where a lead isn't working, or here's where this definition doesn't make sense, or where this word doesn't make sense, or where this gap is.
Yes. And I've seen a lot of baggage get in the way of having really clear, unemotional conversations sometimes. So if one team's displaying good faith and communicating, we're trying to improve this, we really want your help, we want to collaborate on this, and they're still getting a lot of, water cooler talk and just saying one thing and doing another. A lot of times that can be baggage from past experience, past leadership in that company, past experience at other companies. That's a lot harder to deal with, right?
Yes. And essentially what you're describing is something I would run into in every client engagement. And part of the reason why I wanted to go into coaching is because you see this, you're watching it, and you know it has nothing to do with marketing. It has nothing to do with sales. It has everything to do with the individual and the way that they are showing up and the way that they are processing things, the way that they are communicating. So for me, like I was very drawn to that part of things, which led me obviously into coaching. But you're right. It has everything in a lot of cases, or at least where I think people are challenged with conflict, is like they need to turn inward in those moments and really kind of separate like what's going on here for me and how am I showing up in this situation, and am I bringing some things into this situation that aren't serving the purpose that we all have, that aren't serving me in a positive way, and really breaking those things down, which is a difficult process to do. And some people also don't have the awareness around that as well.
Yeah. And it's so hard to deal with that as an individual contributor who doesn't have positional authority to be able to. I mean, sometimes you should start with a conversation with them, but sometimes that isn't the healthiest approach for you. Do we want to talk a little bit about knowing when to have like a direct one-on-one with somebody versus maybe I talk to their manager because I'm not sure how to handle this, or my manager?
Yeah, I feel like there are some definite red flags. Like most people know what an abrasive leader or person looks like.
Yeah.
And if you start to really kind of understand what emotional regulation looks like, for example, you can kind of see this play out. So if you can see a pattern of somebody who is not emotionally regulated, there's nothing that you can really do. I mean, you can bring your regulation, you can bring your calm, which, in those situations, if you're an individual contributor, you're usually not calm. You're usually nervous. You're usually fearful. So if you can bring your own emotional regulation, like that is a great invitation for somebody else to be regulated. Like there's a theory around how when we're regulated, it actually helps others become and stay regulated. However, it's not your job.
Right.
And it's unlikely that anything you say will change that individual's behavior, because if they're activated, they're not hearing you. So many things happen when our brain gets activated. We go into our fight or flight, triggered state, and the way we operate changes. The way that we, receive information changes. The way that we make decisions changes. And so I think that if you can start to see, is somebody activated right now, then you can say, this is probably not going to be a productive conversation. Or, they don't seem activated. They seem calm. They seem regulated. I feel like they're open to discussion. I know how they communicate. You have to also kind of know how to communicate with them. Then, yeah, there might be an opportunity. But if you're trying to bring down in terms of, activation or emotional, right, response, if you're trying to bring somebody else down, but they're activated and you don't have the skill set to do that, then it's probably not in your best interest to have that conversation then and there.
Yeah, I like that you point that out, because it is so easy to further escalate the situation with facial expressions, body language. You may not even be aware are happening if you're really nervous or just kind of scared. So shutting down the conversation, this isn't going to be productive. Let's talk about this another time, and figuring out a different way seems like a really good approach. I haven't been on both of those scenarios where the conversation was fine and the conversation was not fine.
Right. And it's, again, you are not in control of the other person's emotions and their emotional regulation. So it just goes to show why that work for yourself is really important. The ability for you to stay regulated in those moments is the most important thing that you can do, because it applies to every area of your life, not just your job.
Yeah. And asking somebody what's going on or why this is difficult for them, that's not good to do in the moment all the time too. That's tough. Yeah. Self-awareness is hard when you're activated.
Yeah. And then the problem in this scenario becomes that if you don't have a culture of continuous feedback, if you don't have a culture where you are always giving feedback in the form of maybe 360 reviews or pulse checks, something like that, where people are getting a chance to observe how others perceive them, then it's harder for them to see it, because you want people to see what they can't see. And there's only so many ways that you can go about that in a way that, again, doesn't put you in the direct line of conflict. And there's, you don't end up as collateral damage there. And there has to be a culture built around that. So you can go to your manager and say, hey, I have some feedback, or this is the experience that I had, da. But if there's no process in place then for your manager to share that feedback, or for you to share that feedback anonymously and know that something is going to happen with it, then, that's right. It doesn't really get you anywhere. So I would say too, that's something it's a great question to ask when you're doing interviews. It's a great question to understand, what does that process look like? What does that feedback loop look like for people within my team and people outside of my team?
Yeah. And it's almost easier when they're obvious about it and do it in front of everybody, because there's corroboration that actually happened. Whereas when they're saying one thing and then doing another in private, it's just so much harder to deal with. Hana, thank you so much. I am excited to talk to you again tomorrow about how to have the hard interview conversation about why you left.
Me too. Thank you.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out calibermind.com.